Hello and welcome to the Blue Monday podcast, a 3 times weekly show looking into the sometimes exciting happenings of Ipswich Town Football Club. My name is Mikey Smith, and this is our end of season review, part 2, for all of you sadistic people out there that just can't get enough. Speaking of whom, how are you, Joe Fairs?
I just can't get enough either of this beautiful season that we've had to endure.
Yeah. And speaking of enduring, you did a run today, didn't you, Jay?
Yeah, I smashed around 2 kilometres at the Alton Water Fun run. Made more difficult by having my 2-year-old on my shoulders for about 1.5 of those kilometres. But he just got down for the photos at the end, sort of to take the glory in the finish line.
Great stuff. How long did that take?
I don't know. I haven't had an official time through yet. So somewhere just under 20 minutes.
Yeah.
How long it would take to
your
quickly walk 2K.
Great stuff. Well, so when Ben and Rich left us after part 1, which is of course still on the Blue Monday YouTube channel, check it out if you haven't watched it. I don't know why you'd be watching part 2 if you hadn't watched part 1, but there might be one of you out there. So they'd left us with Paul Lambert taking over. Now this was a weird one, wasn't it, Joe? Because the name kind of came from nowhere, and I think my initial reaction, I'll admit, was, really, Paul Lambert? I sort of thought that he was such a merry-go-round manager, and obviously the Norwich connection I didn't really like. But then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, actually, this might be the right decision for this moment. Were those the lines that you were on as well, or were you all for it from the word go?
Well, there wasn't really any time for anyone to be linked, was there? Because everyone knew that Hurst was going, and there was all the rumblings of it. And then the first sort of national newspaper to break with the Hurst news, it was Lambert to replace Hurst at Ipswich. There was no, and I picked up Lambert odds because I knew that he had the job because I'd spoken to someone, and from straight away he was like 4-1 on at all the bookies, and you were betting 50 quid to get sort of almost 10 back, and there was never a race, there was never a competition. He had the job straight away, so you didn't really have a chance to compare him against the other people like the long search in the summer where you could pick your favourites. It was either this is who it is, like it or lump it. And I think the majority of fans were relatively. There was definitely a lot about the Norwich connection but I think once people sort of looked to see his relationship with Norwich and how he fell out with them by leaving them, I think that helped with a few fans, the fact that he ended up suing Norwich and leaving on terrible terms. But he hasn't done an awful lot since leaving Norwich. He had a long spell at Villa, and it was a case of I don't think anyone was blown away by the appointment, but I think a lot of people probably went with the same view that I had, that it looked probably one of the better choices out of the experienced managers available at the time.
And even back then, where was this, October or November?
I think he was appointed at the very end of October.
Okay, yeah.
So it was like the 26th, 27th of October, the day of the Millwall game. He was appointed.
We were already saying through gritted teeth that this might be a good appointment for League One, weren't we? Like we were already saying that.
Yeah, no, there was all the talk of what he'd done at Norwich, the bouncing back.
But then, so he took training on the Monday after the 3-0 debacle at Millwall, where Ipswich fans thought that remembrance was a minute's applause rather than a minute's silence, which is quite interesting. But he had a pretty good first home game on paper. We played Preston, and there was a surprise inclusion of a player that we hadn't seen yet, Joe.
No, and despite at the end of the season, Preston finished just outside the playoffs. At one point, it looked like they were going to make it. At this point, I think they were also in the bottom 3 with us.
They were down there with us,
just outside it. And the surprise inclusion was Jordan Roberts up front. He'd signed almost as a project player from Paul Hurst, and I think he'd come on against Derby and played a few minutes out on the wing, and he played a little bit against Exeter in the League Cup. But when he was playing as a centre forward straight through the middle, and we were looking to play a 4-3-3 system with Roberts as the target man and Sears and anyone playing off him. And it looked like the decision was Lambert needs that guy for his system, that sort of player, and he was the best option in the squad to do it. That he didn't really have any other choices with Ellis Harrison out.
Yeah, you're right. And to be fair to Jordan Roberts, he was bang up for it, wasn't he? In that first half, especially, he was really, really on it. And we won a penalty, didn't we? Which I don't think we'd done by this stage. I think it was
I can't remember any penalties before that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it Caden Jackson that got away, and I think.
Yeah. See, we're already struggling, aren't we? It was it was Freddie Sears. It was Freddie Sears, wasn't it?
Freddie was brought down by the keeper, who picked up a yellow card. Sort of more on that later. Freddie Sears picked himself up and scored the penalty, and we were leading well into the second half when Paul Gallagher comes on and with his first touch scores a free kick past the keeper, and then 2 minutes later, I think this one was Jackson, or no, this was Jordan Roberts won the penalty, and this was Jordan Roberts as well, beat the keeper to the ball right out wide. The keeper picked up a second yellow, and then
Paul Gallagher, who steers about him, didn't he?
He just came on, scored a goal, and then was sent, and then went in goal, and we had basically 20 minutes to try and score past the keeper, and we didn't really do enough. We didn't create enough. After a very good first half, we looked like we ran out of gas. The only real save the keeper had to make was from Danny Rowe, a volley from the edge of the box, which he struck probably too well because it ended up almost going straight at the keeper. But that was, I think everyone walked away from that game saying, right, we can see what Lambert's trying to do here, where especially under the later Hurst games, it was mix and match, changing this, changing that, and you're sort of walking away. You couldn't even tell what formation or what style he was trying to play, where Lambert came in and seemed to have a style implemented within one game. Yeah,
absolutely. And the early positive impressions that I had were just really small things, like Roberts coming in and looking so up for it, and he looks like a player that day. Freddie Sears taking the penalty and taking it so calmly. I don't know if he'd even scored all season. He barely played, but the fact that he stepped up and took the penalty and just tucked it away with confidence, I just thought, oh wow, like Lambert must have been in Sears' ear already. And Bart, he'd had a really tough start to the season, and he hadn't had a good game at Millwall. He actually looked pretty steady in that game, and we thought maybe Hurst going we're gonna get back the Bartos Białkowski of old, but alas, that was a first impression, not a lasting one. But then we went to Reading, which we absolutely loved doing. It was pissing it down with rain, but we started really, really well in that first half, didn't we, at Reading?
Yeah, after 11 minutes, it was 2-1 to Ipswich with Gwion Edwards scoring a sort of decent volley, and then pulling one back against the run of play, as ridiculous as that sounds, in the first 10 minutes. And then from a long Bartos kick, Roberts goes up with his man. He's playing centre forward again and causing them problems. I don't think he gets a touch on it, and Sears manages to nip in behind him, score past the keeper, and we're flying. And for the rest of that half, we're well on top. And I think a lot of the fans there going in at 2-1 were a little bit disappointed and a little bit concerned that it was only 2-1, as the sort of second half will prove, they were right to be the case, because that was a backs to the wall onslaught. We didn't get going in at half at all, and it took until about 5 minutes from the end before we conceded, but it felt inevitable that whole time. And again, there was sort of 2 games where we picked up 2 points, and we really could have picked up 6, but a lot of the fans were thinking, well, actually, we look like we're going to be giving this a go at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that first half performance, we were splitting the centre halves, weren't we? That was the first time that we saw that. Bartos was trying to play it out from the back, and it was kind of working against Reading. And then obviously we scored the goal because he didn't have that pass on, and Reading had pulled out wide, and he just pumps it through the middle. I'm not sure whether he meant to put it as central as he did. I think he miskicked it slightly, but he hit it with such power it went straight through the middle. But that was the first that we saw of us really trying to play it out from the back.
Yeah.
How did you feel about us doing that, Joe? Because that's looking at those defenders that we had. I know this has been the expert after the event, but was that really going to work?
Personnel-wise, I don't think it was going to work. It's not just that you had Pennington, who I'd say is relatively comfortable on the ball, Chambers, who is not even relatively comfortable on the ball. One of them was playing on the wrong side as well. You had, was it Jordan Spence who was in at right back at this point, who was struggling even then at that point, and so you had sort of 3 or 4 defenders who were struggling, and Knudsen at left back, who also is not the best on the ball and defensively. So you've got 4. Like I say, it was not the right defenders to do it with, but we didn't really get caught out by it in those first few games we were trying it. A couple of times it went poorly, but we didn't get caught out in the sort of way that you get caught and concede goals straight away. We were sort of probably pushing our luck a little bit, but I thought it was a right thing to try and do. But with the January transfer window so far away, I think it was a bit of a concern.
Yeah, and even though Roberts played pretty well again, like he was actually unlucky not to score in this game, I was already beginning to think, really, is he really going to be our centre forward? Because Harrison was MIA at this point, and I mean, Caden Jackson, I don't know whether Lambert fancied him from the get-go. But then, so as you say, we picked up 2 points from 2, but there was positivity in some respects, because we were thinking, we could have won either of those games, and we couldn't really say that about the end of Paul Hurst's reign. No. So we went into that West Brom game at home, and just moving away from the football side of it slightly, that was the first of the £10 ticket games. It was a Friday night game live on Sky, and Carl Fuller raised a load of money, didn't he, to get tickets for people that couldn't afford to go, which was, I don't know, it was. I felt like there was already a feel-good factor coming around the club, and Carl Fuller doing that certainly helped. And Blue Action also that was the first time I really noticed them that night as well.
Yeah, I was one. I'm not sure whether this game or one of the previous games was the launch for Blue Action, that they were officially launching on one of these nights. I think it could well have been this one, but it may have been one of the games at the end of the Hurst reign. But this was one where we really noticed them, and I think you're saying about Carl Fuller, he just put a tweet out saying he's going to buy tickets for 2 people that can't afford it, and that just caught fire and ended up with sort of a couple of thousand tickets being bought for and handed out around schools, charities, and there was a really good atmosphere in the ground that Friday night. I think Friday night games always have a decent atmosphere because people have finished work, had a few beers and gone to the game, and there's always a little bit more of a vocal crowd in for those sort of games, and it was unfortunately not matched with the result.
It wasn't, no, but looking at those lineups, and I know that West Brom ended, spoiler alert, didn't get promoted in the end, but you look at, especially looking at the centre halves that they had, which was Dawson and it's Hagazi, isn't it?
El Ghazi, yeah.
And then the forward options that they had. So they had Harvey Barnes, Jay Rodriguez. Don't know if Gale was fit.
He was on the bench, wasn't he? Yeah. I think he was back fit.
Carnu, as well. So they had those 4, and we had Jordan Roberts with Sears out wide again. And I think we had Guyan Edwards on the other wing to begin with. We just didn't really threaten that first half, and West Brom went 2-0 up, didn't they? But to our credit, I seem to remember that the players weren't hiding that night. They were still trying. It wasn't as depressing as the Middlesbrough game that was on Sky earlier on in the season, where we were similarly outclassed.
No, and unlike the first 2 games, this was actually a game where we seemed to get stronger towards the end of it, where the first 2 games we looked like we really ran out of steam. But this one, Harvey Barnes in the first half was just destroying us sort of time and time again. He just kept getting on the ball and driving their whole team forward. And maybe if they had kept him for the season, they probably could have probably even got into that top 2. He was looking that good at that time. But 2-0 down, I think Caden Jackson came on and scored a late goal after a defensive mix-up. And while we may not have deserved a point on the balance of the game, when you got 5 minutes left, you're chasing a goal, and we did. And we got a free kick, which was almost the last kick of the game, which Jack Lancaster went over and sort of showed sort of great confidence and maturity for a 18, 19-year-old. And he had a ping at goal with it, and it just clipped the far post, and that was sort of full time. But sort of 6 inches the other way, and that was
I think that could have been a real momentum changer, because that was Jack Lancaster. That game was him sort of announcing himself to the Ipswich crowd, wasn't it? And what I liked about him is that he just had that like arrogance to take that strike on, because the Sky commentators, because I was watching that in my armchair, and I remember the Sky commentators pelting him at first for shooting, because they hadn't realised that it was as close as it was. They hadn't realised that it clipped the post, and they were having a go at him for shooting where he should have crossed. But actually looked at it, he made the right decision. He executed it really well, and that's kind of been a criticism of a few of the youngsters that we've had in the team, is that they haven't backed themselves. If they've got the quality, they haven't quite backed themselves. Were you surprised by how well he seemed to fit in straight away? Because obviously you're an academy expert, you've seen him loads. Like, was that introduction a surprise to you or not?
The progress he made has been a real big surprise, really, because generally players sort of play for the under-18s either as a schoolboy, as a first year, and then the sort of players that seem to break through go straight into the under-23s, and you never see them go. Jack played for the under-18s all last season, and to jump from the under-18s to the first team just doesn't really happen at that age. He had a spell out on loan at Bury, which by all accounts was a making of him. I didn't get across to see him there, but he came back in pre-season, and in this new system that Hurst was bringing in with the wide forwards, which we hadn't really played under Mick, he just looked from the very start of pre-season, he just looked the best. Almost him and Idris El Mazouni were just looking the best players on the pitch almost in every game. And so yes and no, it was a surprise how quickly he progressed, but once you'd seen him through pre-season and through the under-23s games at the start of the season, it wasn't a surprise how he came into the team at that point.
Yeah, and then so we move to the Bristol City game. So this is game number 4 of the Paul Lambert era, and we've got 2 points from 3, but the signs are good. But we're maybe already thinking he's got too much to do, and January was still just too far away, wasn't it? But we have Bristol City at home, and again we looked really good in the first half. Obviously we didn't against West Brom, but it was more like what we saw against Reading and Preston, against slightly weaker opposition. And one thing that I noted from this game is that Freddie Sears was shooting from distance confidently, and it's like Lambert just seemed to make a real impression on a few of our players when he initially came in, didn't he?
Yeah, and Sears was the one that really improved really quickly under Lambert, and he went from being a sort of ineffectual wide man or ineffectual striker to a wide forward that was just playing off. Whilst it wasn't a 4-4-2 big man little man, the way he makes his runs and how clever he is, he was running off Jordan Roberts as though when we get the ball up quickly to him, he was almost playing as a second striker, but from sort of one of the wide positions. And I think there was a few comments in the press from Lambert and others just sort of saying, so I knew he was a good player, but I didn't realise how good a player he was. I didn't realise how clever he was. And I don't think you'd have probably got many Ipswich fans who would have agreed that he was that good at that point, because for a long time under McCarthy, he just hadn't looked dangerous in front of goal. And while people may say that Mick ruined him, or I always thought Sears did a good job for us out wide, but maybe he was having to do too much work out wide to look decent in front of goal, like he did for the first goal, which was probably sort of been forgotten about. But that was a really good goal with a decent bit of football leading up to it and a good finish.
Yeah, it was a quality goal, wasn't it? And it was Cole Skews he was playing in a slightly more advanced position when Lambert first came in, wasn't he? And it was that beautiful crossfield ping, and Sears he scored that goal, but he'd also had a couple of other shots from distance that were well saved or went just wide. Yeah, that was a fantastic goal. But then, can we talk about Bristol City's equaliser for 1-1?
This was for as poor a season as Bart had, and especially sort of at this stage of the season. This is one where it is totally his fault, but it's just a total freak goal. The ball was pinging around, and he'd obviously lost his bearings, and he just stuck a hand out of the ball and managed to swat it into the net in front of the Churchman's End. And like I say, it was a dreadful goal. And when you look on the sort of lowlights reel for Bart for this season, this will probably be one that stands out as a terrible error. But there were much bigger errors for me than this one. This was a freak as opposed to poor goalkeeping. It
was just everything was just sort of going wrong, wasn't it, at that moment? And I know in the first part of the season review, Ben was talking about XG quite a lot. I'm not bringing that to the table here, but I imagine the XG of that goal couldn't possibly be above 0.0. But then Sears again pops up in the second half and scores another decent goal. And at this point, maybe we're thinking maybe this would be a great win to get, and that would have been 5 points from 4 games, which we would have certainly taken that at any stage of the season, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and I think this was the key almost. I know a lot of people at that point said that when we lost this game, this was when they knew we were down. I didn't quite think it that early. I thought we probably would be, but I didn't think we were down at that point. But you look at the run we've had. We've played Preston and we've been the better team, and we've played against 10 men for the end. Keeper's made a good save. We've come away with a point. Reading, we've gone there and we've flown at them. Only come away with a point. We've then sort of played West Brom, who were at this point flying in the league and so close to getting that point. And it's like we're just waiting for something to give the season lift off, and nothing happens. And we played so well against Bristol City here, 1-0 up, and then we concede that dreadful goal, which we just spoke about. And the crowd is deflated, the ground is deflated. And then within 2 minutes, we're back in front. And it's like that atmosphere goes up. And it's like, I think there's definitely something happening here. But I think, like I say, the 2 late goals and one sort of Pennington loses his man and Jedu heads it in.
Yeah.
And from that point on, we don't really recover for the rest of the season. I think, like I say, the people that said they knew we were down then, that they were probably right in that stage, because that was just 4 games where we've given it a really good go, and we came out of it with 2 points.
Especially when you look at what follows.
Yeah,
because this is the first of the series of games that me and Joe are going to talk through that are just so predictable.
Yeah.
2-0 defeats away from home. Another Bart error early on leaves us chasing the game. Jonas Knudsen was all over the place for the second goal. I think Sears is closer to the outside right than Knudsen is, which just shouldn't happen when Sears is playing in that advanced position. And I think, Roberts had dropped to the bench, if I'm not mistaken, in this one.
Yeah, I think Jackson started this one, didn't he?
Yeah.
He had a good chance. He had a header quite sort of after their first goal, which was early on, and which is one of the goals where I would give Bart a lot of criticism for, because it was just a soft shot, which he fumbled straight out to the goal scorer and just killed the game within 5 minutes, because at this stage we just were struggling to score goals away from home. And like I say, I think that just killed it. And knowing that we were away at Stoke the game after, and that went the same way, another 2-0 defeat, 5 changes, Dean Gherkin back in the side. Again, we played all right, but we let in a goal, improved, let in another goal. And Cole Skuse got injured in this game, who had, in those early Lambert games, was playing really well. Cole Skuse gets injured. He was out for sort of 2 months, which I say in inverted commas, because from that injury, he rushed back from that injury and
he wasn't the same.
Didn't
player.
look the same player at all. He'd started well under Lambert, and that was a big blow. That was losing Skuse, and it basically was out for the season, it seems. But
yeah. So just quickly going back to that Forest game, something I've written down is that when Bart makes a mistake, the way I've seen it in the last few years, because McCarthy wasn't against dropping Bart, I always saw it as double jeopardy, because 1, we've got the mistake, and 2, there's the danger of the weaker goalkeeper Dean Gherkin coming in. But on this occasion, when he came back in, I was actually quite relieved. I felt it was becoming quite hard to watch Bart again.
Yeah, and at this point, we'd appointed Jimmy Walker as a goalkeeping coach, which you would hope would have helped. And I think it was a West Brom game where he was doing the press for it, and he came out and was saying the way he'd been dropped for the derby was totally disrespectful, and he seemed to have his bounce back in him. But then that error against Bristol City, which was an unfortunate error, just seemed to kill him again, and he just was poor again from that point, and sort of rightly dropped. And I've been a big fan of his, and I didn't think he should have been dropped for the Norwich game, but
no,
there was no real choice at this point.
Yeah, for this one, he had to be taken out of the firing line, I thought. Was this Lancaster's first start?
Quite
throwing that one
I
at
think
you.
it was.
I think it possibly was. And
Forest. Are we still talking about Forest or Stoke?
No, sorry, we're at Stoke.
We're at Stoke. I think he started at Forest actually.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he started at Forest because someone told me that he was going to be starting, and I let someone know that knew him when he was a kid, and they sort of jumped in the car and flew up to Nottingham and just missed kick-off to see him make his debut. But
Yeah. Okay. Well, he was certainly lively in this Stoke game, looking back at the highlights, and he was perhaps unlucky not to score in this one. Joe Allen scored a really classy goal. I mean, the fact we're really disappointed that it's such another really predictable 2-0 defeat. And I know that Stoke weren't doing particularly well under Gary Rowett, but you look at the two players that scored. It was Thomas Ince, and Joe Allen. Like, I mean, come on, we're not in that. We're not in that league, really, are we? Even if we are. But then we move on to we'll brush aside those 2-0 defeats. More to come from that result. But we go to the Wigan game at home, and I'd flag this one up as the first must-win of the Paul Lambert era. But I'm also going to call it Wind, Rain, and Reece James.
Yeah.
How good was he that day?
He was every time I saw him last season, I thought he was the best player on the pitch, and this was no exception. This was the first time I'd seen him in the flesh, and he was just like for such a young kid, just the maturity of the display and his sort of delivery, his crosses, and was it him that had a couple of free kicks right at the end, which Dean Gherkin did brilliantly to get down and save in the sort of terrible conditions. But this was a McCarthy type 1-0, get a goal and just sit back and pray that the game ends before they score, and it did, and that was a real big lift, that one, going into the Christmas period where we had some tough games coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to bring it back to Reece James again. Because Ipswich won this game, the media department decided to upload the extended highlights onto YouTube, but there was barely any Ipswich chances in it. And if you watch back, which I think if you're interested in what we keep raving about Reece James, just watch that extended highlights. He is in every single highlight for positive reasons, and he whipped in a few incredible crosses, a couple of through balls. He was unlucky not to score; it hit the bar. But despite him being amazing, Freddie Sears popped up with. I mean, that must be one of the shittest goals you'll ever see, wasn't it?
It was a goal befitting the conditions and the quality of the two sides, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it was actually really befitting of where I was when it went in, which is the Wetherspoons opposite Brixton Station.
Oh, very nice.
Which is not, even by Wetherspoon standards, is not particularly nice. But yeah, we got the win, didn't we? And fair play to Dean Gherkin, because they were chucking everything at him, and he, by hook or by crook, he managed to keep the ball out of the goal. So then at this stage, we're only 5 points off the drop. So I'm thinking we've only won once under Lambert, but we're looking better. And you felt, and we all maybe assumed wrongly that it will get better after January.
Yeah. And at this stage, it did look like that there was 4 or 5 really poor sides that were going to be a long way adrift of the rest of the division, and we only needed to get ahead of. Which, as it ended, really, we only need to get ahead of Bolton, Rotherham and Reading. And I know Reading picked up at the end of the season, but Bolton and Rotherham stayed right down there. And whilst, I know this is more for the end of the season, whilst Lambert did a decent job, results were poor. Everything off the pitch was good, but the results were poor. And we only needed to pick up something like 6 or 8 more points in Reading over the course of over 30 games, and we weren't able to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was the two draws at the start of the reign that were the problem, weren't they? Yeah. They were the ones that we perhaps should have won, and then we don't have the monkey on the back, and then maybe we can go to places like Stoke and go to places like Forest and play with a little bit more vigour. But we did build on that home win against Wigan when we played Sheffield United in the next game, didn't we?
Yep. Ellis Harrison, I don't know whether this was his first start for some time since sort of the early part of the season. Yeah. First start under Lambert.
Dazelle was back in as well.
But I think this was probably the best sort of centre forward display we've had of the season. He until sort of Keane came in later on, but he bullied the defenders. He won headers. He brought people into play. He scored a really, really well taken goal from a sort of tough position. And I was thinking if we can keep sort of that Harrison fit for a few games, then we've got a chance here to make Lambert's system work, because he was the sort of player that was needed in that system. But again, we couldn't keep him fit.
No, but what Lambert was doing with Harrison, which Hurst never did, was he was playing to his strengths, and we were playing a counter-attacking football, and then inevitably Sheffield United were getting the ball and trying to play out, and we just pressed really hard, didn't we? And I think Nolan had quite a good game in this one. Chalobah had a good game, I remember, and as you mentioned, Harrison he was awesome in that first half.
Yeah.
Chambers had a goal ruled out. Billy Sharp had a goal ruled out. And must admit, I was still in the Legends bar when Billy Sharp equalised. Looking back, it was a decent goal, but Sharp could see Chambers' number for about 4 seconds, and that can't happen. One, Chambers should know that he should always be looking for where Billy Sharp is. And who's the right back standing a few yards away from him that can see all of it and saying nothing?
Jordan
Spence again. And I don't want him being a scapegoat, but he didn't help. He didn't help. His form, he wasn't a great player in the first place, but his form really let him down under Lambert, I thought. And it wasn't a surprise to see him completely bombed out in the end.
No, I just couldn't understand why we were sort of rotating every other position, but Spence was staying in the team despite not. I was never as sort of anti-Jordan Spence as a lot of the fan base became. I just thought he was a sort of limited but decent enough defender, but nothing special. But he was clearly in poor form. Whether you thought he was a good player or a bad player, you could tell he was in form. Not in form. You could tell he was struggling. His head was on a swivel all game. He didn't know where he was going. He wasn't affecting the game at either end of the pitch. And like I say, sort of, there's a lot of mysteries about this season, but one of them will always be the Janoi Donatian situation.
Wow. I mean, you could write a book on that one. It's just bizarre, isn't it? He was quite clearly a better right back, but it was, I don't know whether it's political reasons or what, but he just wasn't playing, was he?
No.
One thing that I took out of this game, and I don't often do this, the ref was terrible, really, really bad, and because Norwood kicked Chalobah off the ball, didn't he? And it was right in front of the ref, and the ref just booked him.
I can't remember as poor a season of officiating as I've seen this year. I don't know whether it's because the Championship, the quality has improved and the refs just aren't able to keep up with the Premier League standards as the fitness and ability of the players improve in this league. But every single week the refs were poor. They were, and I don't just mean they were anti-Ipswich and we didn't get decisions. I just felt that they were just baffling decisions from both sides. They were just getting into runs of giving us every decision for 10 minutes and the other team every decision for 10 minutes. And just, I don't know, right up until the sort of last game of the season, I thought the refs were poor.
Yeah, and Sheffield United didn't really deal in draws last season, did they? But in the end, I think they took the point, didn't they? Which was a boost for us, really. And then we moved. I mean, we're playing every couple of days at this stage. It's QPR away on Boxing Day, and this is another way of thinking, not a must-win, but if we're a
potential game where you can pick something up, wasn't it?
Yeah, the hashtag winnable to use the preview show phrase. And you know what? I was at that game and we weren't too bad to begin with. We seemed to carry the confidence out of the Sheffield United game with us. And John Nolan was actually having a really good game.
And then he was the best player on the pitch until that point.
And then tell us what point that is, Joe. Then
he decides to play a crossfield pass to no one in particular, and it's a perfect pass is it Naki Wells or is it the Polish striker, I can't remember, who just picks up the ball and just drives forward, but has a shot which the keeper saves and the rebound is just put away. But it was just, we were sort of dominating the ball, dominating the game almost, and we just played it to them and gave them a sort of 2-on-1, which we didn't recover from. And from that point on, it ended 3-0. It's probably our worst defeat of the season, that and Norwich away, and we just were dreadful. And just to sort of add a bit of insult to injury, Grant Ward came back into the team that day slightly innocuous looking challenge, which he ends up sort of hobbling off to, and he's done his ACL and is out for the season.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
that might be the end of his stint in it as an Ipswich player.
quite possibly. Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen what the deal is with Grant Ward, and I think it seems like he's going to be sticking around to get himself fit, and then he'll be looking for another club, maybe Colchester or someone like that. But to be honest, obviously felt bad for Grant Ward, and I wasn't overly concerned about it on one hand, because I just simply don't rate him as a footballer. I don't like he just doesn't bring enough to the table and often enough for me. But then the injuries were starting to stack up, weren't they? And it's just another player, and he does offer. I guess he does offer something different. He's that pacey wide player that we don't really have. And yeah, he's gone. And then we've got to go up to Middlesbrough, haven't we?
And this was our standard away game. Start okay, letting a poor goal, which was Jordan Spence on a foul. But I didn't think this was a foul personally. It was just sort of went up for a header. No one appealed for it. I can't believe the ref gave it. And then coming to the game, play a bit better, and then letting a late goal and 2-0 and without really threatening, really, isn't it? And that's sort of a run of 6 games, which has 4 away games in which we've scored none, conceded 9, and sort of brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, what else do you say? One thing though, we never seem to save penalties, do we? We don't get many penalties. We never seem to save any anymore.
I can't remember much of anything penalty-wise that we saved, but
yeah, it's just something that I had written down. But we'll move to the next game, which was this was the Millwall game at home, and maybe this was the one where a lot of even more people. It was a little bit like the Bristol City game in that a lot of people lost hope after this one, didn't they?
I think this was it for me, this game here. And sort of there was a bit of interesting news that broke sort of a couple of days before this game, which ended up directly affecting this game, which was that Jonas Knudsen at that point, after about 4 or 5 weeks before this, it was that his agent's going to be in touch with Lambert. Lambert sort of recommended to Evans that a new deal be signed, and then all of a sudden there's news that Callum Elder is training with us and that Jonas Knudsen might go. Miles Kenlock comes into the team, and Jack Lancaster scores a really good early goal, and we're looking good.
Iron Robin-esque, wasn't it, that goal?
Yeah, and it's another one of those performances where first half is good. We are 1-0 up, and realistically, we could have been more up. We were playing well there, and then in about a 10-minute spell in the second half, we go from 1-0 up to 3-1 down, and it's just a calamity of errors. Steve Morrison comes on the right wing. Miles Kenlock is playing left back, and their tactic is just to knock the ball out to him on the right wing, and he just bullies Miles Kenlock, while we've got a Danish international left back who is sort of almost better at centre back, sitting on the bench, and sort of Lambert. Personally, for me, I think he should have changed that. I know Knudsen was off, but at that point we were still in it, and this was a 6-pointer, and Steve Morrison just dominated us on that side. There was an awful goal conceded where Pennington sold Dean Gherkin short. Again, that was one where the ref could have given that as a free kick, because the striker did go in over the ball to Gherkin. But
there was the other one.
We weren't getting a lot of luck at that point, were we?
No, that was the game where Jordan Spence shielded the ball out for a corner, thinking it was a goal kick.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Is that the one where he's selling the keeper short? I'm not sure.
No. There was Spence saw the ball out for a corner, but no one must have been talking to him, because I was at the back of the south stand and I was shouting, "It's going to be a corner," and there must have been someone telling him, because it wasn't like the ball just went off. Somebody should have. There was plenty of time to get the message to keep it in, and then they inevitably scored from the corner, and then
he shielded it out, didn't he? He didn't just let it run out. He actually shielded it out.
No, he just
got his body. He got his body in front of it a little bit.
And then,
it's embarrassing.
And then it was the one where, like I say, it was Matthew Pennington tried to play the ball back to Gherkin and just sold him short. Yeah. And it was just an absolute calamity. And it was just, we've gone from 1-0 up in a must-win game to 3-1 down. And Caden Jackson did actually score a really good goal later in that game. But it's one of those ones that's forgotten about. Yeah,
in a different context, that goal we'd talk about for years. When it was a brilliant little touch and the absolute thunder bastard of a strike. But yeah, it's feeling pretty flat. and we're as Ipswich fans, we're starting to think, can it get much worse than this? What's January got in store for us? Like, surely things are going to get slightly better. We start bringing in a few new players,
Yeah,
and then
Will Keane and Callum Elder are in, aren't they?
They're in, and we go up to Accrington Stanley, and you go with them, don't you, Jay?
Yeah, no, I went up to Accrington, and whilst a lot of people think we're not going to do very well in League One because of games like this, I think they have to remember we did make 7 changes for this game, and we were crap. So
we were so bad. Yeah.
We didn't deserve anything. Will Keane came on as a sub for his debut, having just signed, and he looked relatively sharp. We had a couple of things come from him, but Lambert sort of came out after the game and said, because personally I think the Millwall game was the end of it, and I think he knew that. He came out after the game and said the club needs to be rebuilt and some players will go. At that point, we didn't see Jordan Spence again after that game. We didn't see Gwion Edwards for a long time after that game, and he was probably the poorest player on the pitch. So I don't know whether he was.
Yeah, he thought he was in Kesgrave, I think, because he was just running around cul-de-sacs, wasn't he? That was a really, really bad performance from that right side. Teddy Bishop came on though and I thought he looked quite sharp as well. That was one positive. It wasn't a positive, was it? But that was a
neutral.
Yeah, and the beer was cheap, wasn't it? The fans were friendly.
Yeah, no, it was a nice place to go, but it felt like a cup tie where that's going to be a league tie next year, and there's not going to be the 1,000 Ipswich fans who are there because it's a new ground and something to do. That's going to be the reality, and if that's a game in a part of the season where we're not doing particularly well, there's going to be 400 fans on that cold terrace there, and it's not going to be anywhere near as fun as that 1-0 defeat was.
Yeah. Hashtag keep away days Southern.
Yep. 100% agree with that.
Yeah, sorry, Mullet. He's just switched off, so we can say what we like now. We bring in James Collins, don't we, ahead of Rotherham at home, which is
Well, we bring in. Well, we're very close to signing Anthony Pilkington at this point as well. That falls through right at the last minute, and we end up bringing in Simon Dawkins, who sort of is a very different player. He was a player on a short-term contract, which we were very unlikely to get anything from, and we didn't get anything from. Where Pilkington was a decent player. Colin Quainer came in.
Yeah.
James Collins came in, and we played Rotherham. All 4 of the new boys started. Well, apart from Dawkins, but Collins, Quainer, Keane, and Elder all started.
Yeah, and Keane was boosted by having a pep talk from one David Diamond at Milsom's the morning of that game. Yeah. So what the inevitable happened, didn't it, early in the first half?
Dave told him to make some good shapes. One of those good shapes resulted in a goal.
Yeah, it did, didn't it? And this game just turned into complete aerial bombardment. But we had James Collins, didn't we? That massive ginger head heading everything away, and suddenly we look like we've actually got a bit of backbone. Albeit we're getting outplayed a bit by Rotherham, aren't we?
Yeah, that second half we could barely get out of our half. James Collins, the ginger magnet, his head was in that game. I think it was something like 18 headed clearances, or it must have been the highest. There was a big thing made about the stats. I can't imagine anyone headed more times in any other game that season, but it was a sort of a rock performance at the back, and he really seemed to bring up the level of everyone around him. When the game ended, he just collapsed in a heap on the floor, and unfortunately that was sort of how it went. We could never get him fit, could we?
No, but he was a real cult hero after that. I remember doing the flagship, and I was absolutely buzzing by his arrival, and I couldn't wait to see him play. And in the end, I don't think I ever did see him play in the flesh. He's the one that got away. But we could have had him in at the start of the season, couldn't we? I know he ended up injured at Villa, but it might have been a good character to have when Hurst took over.
I think it definitely would have been.
And then, guess what's coming up now? If you're going to guess the scoreline.
A 2-0 away defeat would be my guess.
And then another 2-0 away defeat after that. But yeah, Alan Judge came in, didn't he, before Blackburn away?
Yep. And that was a player that was a real coup. And like I say, for all the criticism Marcus Evans gets as an owner, he really did back Lambert in this January window
Did.
when we were so far adrift to bring in Alan Judge, to bring in Will Keane, Colin Quainer, James Collins. None of these guys were going to come cheap. And when you see the rent some of these guys pay.
Yeah, some of them live in Woodbridge. Yeah, you're not wrong. So one of them who wasn't renting in Woodbridge, he was staying in Milsom's. Will Keane got through 1-on-1 early on in this game at Blackburn, took it round the goalkeeper. Probably should have gone down. The goalkeeper did touch him. He probably should have gone down. But what's striking about this is he's got the ball around the goalkeeper. And he's out wide and he looks up and there's not an Ipswich shirt near him.
No,
not even close. And Caden Jackson was playing. He's quick. And he's obviously put the afterburners on to join him in the box, but it's probably ran in too fast. So he's pretty much run into the defenders, and there was nobody else there. And then Callum Elder was playing at left back, wasn't he? And
he had a shocker, didn't he?
He had
both goals were from sort of errors down his side. He fouled. Is it Adam Armstrong for the first goal and gave away a penalty in the second goal? He just got totally caught out of position. And again, this is when sort of love or loathe Jonas Knudsen, and I'm sure there's not many people that love him anymore. He was a better left back than these, and while he was trying to sort of move out, ultimately he didn't get a move, and we ended up without. Like I say, what was the difference between playing Jonas Knudsen for the last 5 months of the season as opposed to playing James Collins or playing Will Keane or playing Colin Quainer? None of them are going to be here. Or,
yeah, I mean, maybe
it's unlikely
maybe
many
it's
will
Lambert
be
setting a precedent, like he's the boss kind of thing.
Yeah, but I don't know. It just seemed the wrong tack to take. He was either going and went, or he might as well have been used as effectively a short-term deal, which a lot of the other players were on. We sort of shifted a few out that week as well. Danny Rowe and Janoy Donatian went out on loan, and
two players who we quite like.
Yeah, and probably when it came to the end of the season, when you saw the sort of teams we were having to put out, and we never solved the right back problem. James Bree played well when he was there, but again, he's on north of 20 grand a week at Villa. All sort of the rumours are, and there's no way he's going to be dropping down into League One. And we've now got Josh Emanuel there, who was recalled from Shrewsbury because he wasn't playing. He played a few games at the back end of the season, did okay in some, did dreadfully in others, and got the hook at half time in one of them. We're sort of no further forward in that position, and we could have used that time to have a look at Janoy Donatian, and we ran out of wide players. Grant Ward was injured at this point, and letting Danny Rowe go, I don't know. Has he got a future at Ipswich, or will he be at Lincoln next year?
Yeah, I mean he's an enigma, isn't he, Danny Rowe? Like, I mean, what do you say? What do you say? Because we haven't really seen him that much in the Championship, so we can't really give a fair assessment. But he looks much better than the under-23s.
Whenever I have seen him at almost any game he's played, he's always made something happen. Like, I don't watch him as closely as some might, and he might not do enough defensively, but he always makes something happen. Even when we were talking earlier, the Preston game, he came on a sub. He's the one that has that volley at goal, which is well saved. When he played against Forest the sort of season before last, he has two really good chances. Something always seems to happen in an attacking sense when he plays, and his record at Lincoln and previously at Macclesfield sort of seems to show that. Whenever I watch him on Sky for Lincoln, he's always got that bit of quality and composure that can do something, and I think we missed that. Yeah.
That one didn't really sit well with me, because especially with Grant Ward being injured as well, because it's not like we had loads of wide players. So yeah, that was a 2-0 away defeat. Next up is a 2-0 away defeat at Aston Villa.
2-1 that one.
2-1. Sorry.
Yeah.
2-1.
Yeah.
We
scored an away goal.
2-0 down. We did score an away goal, and it was bloody good, but it was the keeper.
It didn't count double.
Yeah, he was sort of a little bit overshadowed that day, Freddie Sears, by a bigger star on the pitch. That's not Tammy Abraham, it's Keith Stroud, isn't it?
Oh God, what a performance! Lambert was furious after the game, and rightly so. The Villa penalty, which I assume it was Abraham that scored the penalty, was Alan Judge supposedly fouling John McGinn when a ball was sailing over their head and they were just turning. And later on in the game, Colin Quainer, after sort of brilliant through ball, gets onto it and has a shot which is quite clearly blocked by the arm of, again, I'm guessing Tommy Elphick or someone like that, that put a block in, and it was an obvious penalty. And those two decisions cost us the game. Trevor Chalobah hit the post late on, and Freddie Sears scored a stunner. But you can't go away to quality sides like Aston Villa and expect to win games when you're on the receiving end of such poor decisions. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. But and Quana looked good in this game, didn't he? He was playing on
the right hand side, wasn't it? Yeah,
wide right of the front three, and at least we did go 2-0 behind, and we were all wrong because we were all saying classic Ipswich 2-0 away defeat. I mean, I even said it here, didn't I?
Yeah.
but like at least they. I mean, the goal was ridiculous, wasn't it? But we did start creating some chances, and at a place like Villa, it wasn't a bad performance, that one. I must have got the order wrong here. So who was next up after Aston Villa?
There's one. It was Sheffield Wednesday.
So we're getting
1-0.
to the end.
This is the end, the middle period. But there was a couple of around the Blackburn game, sort of before the Blackburn game. There was a big announcement that Paul Lambert and his staff will stay into next season. That is the club, and that was a big announcement made by the club that Lambert is going to be here for next season. I think at this point we knew we were going to be going down, and it was a case we are now building for the future. There's no need to talk about the manager and his job security. Admittedly, that did come up after one strange Radio Suffolk interview towards the end of the season, but that was clarified. Marcus Evans also came out and said the club was not for sale as well. But just before the Villa game, again, was sums up our season and the last few years. Jack Lancaster has a back injury. He's going to be out for a few weeks. Well, where are we now? 19th of May, and he didn't play another game that season. His back injury turned into a stress fracture of the back. I think there were a few comments from his father on Twitter that seemed to suggest he was aiming for a return at the end of the season. So probably was wise not to push him back into that. But another player that we missed for a big chunk of the season, and after the impact he made, was a real loss. And hopefully he's fit for pre-season. But
yeah, the strange thing is at this stage we've only won 2 games under Lambert out of 15. So let's say we haven't got to Sheffield Wednesday yet. So we've won 2 out of 15. That's not very good. But it was pretty much unanimous. We were all happy when the news came out about Lambert staying, weren't we? Although, that was probably after, 13 or 14 games. 13 games. So 2 wins in 13 games. We were all pretty much happy about that, weren't we?
Yeah, and we all knew we were going down at this point. I think there was an acceptance amongst the fan base that it was going to take an absolute miracle for us to stay up, and everyone was looking to League One, not the Championship. And Lambert had engendered a positive spirit around the place. He was reconnecting the club back with the fans, and whilst some people sort of laugh at the importance of that, but you just had to look at the reception the players got at the end of the season. And we go into a League One campaign in, I wouldn't say rude health, but we go into a campaign in as good as health as any team you expect to get relegated go down. Like, if you look who we're going down with Bolton. We'll look at the state they're in. Rotherham are coming down with us, and they'll probably are in as good a state as we are, in that they are a very stable club with a stable management team, a stable squad that know how to win games at that level. But we're going down relatively positively amongst the fan base, and sort of without the need for a huge overhaul.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rotherham, let's not forget, they might actually lose a few players, because they've got a few players that have actually proven themselves as good Championship battlers. And if the money comes in, Rotherham will have to accept it. They should find it harder to recruit decent players. They should find it harder than us. Whether they will or not remains to be seen. But yeah, should we finish off? We need to finish off this 16 games. So it was Steve Bruce's first game in charge of Sheffield Wednesday, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. He'd been watching the cricket in the Caribbean for January, and because I think he'd made a promise to his sort of late parents. He'd had a very tough year, and with the death of both of them, and he went across there and stuck with it. And came back and inflicted on us a 1-0 defeat with a 90-odd minute winner, and
Yeah.
that was there. We just signed James Bree before that, and there'd been a lot of drama with Matthew Pennington on deadline day potentially signing on a permanent for Derby, which we blocked.
Yeah, we did. And then he ended up getting injured anyway, didn't he? But
yeah.
I mean, so how do we reflect on these 16 games then? Because quite a lot happened, quite a lot of very predictable Ipswich things happened, but it was a really strange period, wasn't it, of the season?
Yeah, I'd say the first 3 games in an hour at Bristol City when we're 2-1 ahead before the late collapse, it was really positive. We really looked like we were sort of making progress, and it was all that everyone wanted to see at that point, that we were making that progress. But then that losing that Bristol City game and then those 2 away defeats at Forest and Stoke, they were the killers, really. I know we had that win against sort of Wigan straight after that, but it was a case that while we won 2 games and we beat the two of the worst teams in the league at home 1-0 in games that they dominated, really, and it was all about healing the rift between the club and the fans and the players and the management teams and off the pitch. And like I say, this probably cement that away form around over the sort of Christmas period, that just cemented our relegation, really, didn't it?
It did, yeah. We saw it coming. It happened. Come back soon for the last 16 games, I guess. That's I mean, if you've got through to this stage, you're definitely ready for part 3. Wouldn't you say so, Joe? Are you...
Yeah, I'm sort of trying to think of a sort of like trilogy, isn't it? Of what trilogy of movies would sort out these sort of 3 sets of 16 games, but unfortunately there is no Return of the Jedi at the end of it, or anything.
I mean, there's no. I mean, our season is like a really, really bad trilogy with like a happy ending that doesn't make it all okay.
No,
so it's kind of. But yeah, somebody out there.
Maybe Lord of the Rings. All those 3 films look awful.
Game of Thrones is terrible as well, isn't it?
I've only watched the first series. That was enough for me.
Crap. Should we try and anger some more people? Lose a few more more viewers for the third part. So, Joe, do you have anything else to say? Should we try and pick out a positive moment of the middle third?
I'd say the 2 positive moments for me. One was Freddie Sears when he went straight up the other end and scored to put us 2-1 up against Bristol City, and it looked like we were working. And then the other one was Jack Lancaster scoring that early goal against Millwall in what was probably too late, but was a must-win game at that point. And we went 1-0 up and we scored probably this player that was the biggest highlight of the season, with the best moment for him of the season.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw in getting Alan Judge in the building at Ipswich. That may turn out to be a moment that we look back on as a positive in a bad season. What was the worst moment for you?
That late. Well, no, it was the Millwall collapse, the 10-minute Millwall collapse. As bad as we'd been, and the Bristol City game was so disappointing, and the away form was so poor, we weren't really getting left behind by our rivals, because our rivals were all losing every week. That Millwall game, when we were playing one of our direct rivals, we're 1-0 up, we're looking comfortable, and we should be more, and then we contrived to give away 3 of the poorest goals of the city. Well, 2 very, very poor goals and a third goal in the space of about 10-15 minutes, and that just killed the season, and that relegated us.
Okay, and the next one I'm going to throw at you is best goal, because we did weirdly, we scored some decent goals in this part of the season, didn't we? So I'm going to throw in Ellis Harrison against Sheffield United at home, Freddie Sears, his first goal against Bristol City, Caden Jackson's Thunder Bastard against Millwall. I suppose we can chuck in Jack Lancaster's goal against Millwall as well. That was pretty good. Have I missed any? Freddie Sears' goal at Villa. And let's not forget the best of all time, that goal at home to Wigan.
I'd probably say either, again, with sort of the same way I've answered the last two questions. Those two, that Freddie Sears' first one against Bristol City and Jack Lacaster's first one against Millwall, because they just felt such big goals and they felt like we were turning it round somehow, but it just wasn't to be.
Yeah, but they're two players that, well, hopefully will have playing either side of a decent striker next season.
Yeah.
Will Keane we're being linked to at the moment.
Yep.
Well, where do you stand on Will Keane?
I really, really rate him as a player. I thought he put in some really good performances when he played for us at the back end of last season. His injury record worries me, but personally, I think I'd try and sign both him and James Norwood. I think we need quality, and if you can get him in the building, I tend to think that injuries are unlucky rather than players becoming too injury prone, and I'd get him in if we could, if the deal works.
Where do you stand on enormous goalkeepers?
I love enormous goalkeepers. They are my favourite types of goalkeepers. I think it's growing up.
Craig Forrest, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's growing up watching Craig Forrest and just that keeper with sort of like a massive wingspan, long arms and long legs, and look a bit gangly. And I think other than Craig Forrest, I can only really remember Asmir Begovic as a similar keeper to that, where you just see them and they just look enormous. And I don't know. I was probably too young watching Forrest to really know if he was any good or not, but I assume he was. I always liked him, and yeah, I think 6'9" may be pushing it though. Is that too tall? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's mega tall even for an NBA player, really.
Yeah.
Like they're quite a 6'9" in the NBA. You're the big man usually. I don't know what his footwork will be like, and I worry about how silly Harry Wright will look standing next to him.
Well, at 5'9".
Yeah, bless him. But yeah, so please tune in to part 3 of this wonderful trilogy. Even worse than Lord of the Rings is how Joe would describe it. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and be careful what you wish for.
From back to Stewart. Oh, he turns the defender sweetly. Round the goalkeeper. And scores a magnificent goal at the top end.